This Choircast podcast brought to you by Bros, Bibles, and Beer.
What's up, friends? My name is Zach, and I'm joined with my real-world actual friends and podcast hosts, Jeff and Andy. And we like to have conversations, serious conversations on faith and culture while not taking ourselves too seriously.
On any given episode, you'll find us talking with authors and pastors from around the country, local community members that are impacting their churches. We dig in and talk about God's wrath, marriage, and whether the Bible really is inspired by the Holy Spirit, or did some guys just get together and write about their favorite superhero named Jesus?
So join us every week on YouTube or your favorite podcasting app. We're Bros, Bibles, and Beer. Grace,
Peace.
Cheers!
Hey, heathens, you're listening to the Deadly Faith Podcast where religion and crime collide. I'm Laci.
And I'm Lola.
And this shit is gory.
The mind that was in Jesus, that mind is in me.
Without me, life has no meaning.
Why would God tell you what I'm thinking and tell you what I've said to my wife or my husband when you're not around? It's because I'm the pastor of the church and I need to know.
This is the only place where you can see truth.
Oh, ooh. What a play on words. Oh my God.
Okay, I didn't do that on purpose, but
come on.
Yeah, unironically, it works.
It's kind of a cop-out in a way. You didn't have to even think of a word.
I'm sorry. Okay, but when we get to the end of today's episode, which is only part one of this case, we're going to do a two-parter. Congratulations, guys. You're welcome.
We've made it to a two-parter.
You're going to understand why I said gory. So,
God.
It's a little bit of a what.
Don't talk in a baby voice about...
No, I shouldn't.
Fucking blood and guts and shit.
When I'm uncomfortable, I make weird noises with my mouth and weird voices. So, it's how I cope.
That was the loudest I've ever heard you laugh. It was good.
Really, I laugh really loud. So we recorded Monday an episode. It was an interview, and which will already be out by this point. So you guys will have already listened to it. But when we were recording that, we had to do it at a time when all of my children were still awake. And we record right under my children's bedrooms. So I'm recording in my basement.
Yeah, both Laci and I are underneath the children's bedroom. That
exactly.
sounds good.
Exactly. Don't take that out of context, guys. But I got done and I went upstairs and my husband's like, hey, you have to remember that you record right under the kid's bedroom. And Lily goes, yeah, Mom, I heard you say that. I just wish she would die already.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh shit. I was like, I did kind of say that.
Now listen.
If you haven't listened to the interview with Serena, then you need to just go back and listen to it. And it's at the very end. You're totally missing out. It was so good. But
your life is not complete without hearing Serena's story, for sure.
Yeah. My husband's like, you're so loud. And Lily's like, and I heard you say. I was like, oh, fuck. Yeah, I did say that.
That's good.
Hey, heathens, we are interrupting this episode for a message from our sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by Javy. If you have not tried Javy, you're missing out. It is coffee concentrate, and they come in different flavors. So you can get the original, you can get caramel brulee. That's the one I'm drinking right now. And oh my God, it's so good. They also have mocha and French vanilla and a couple other ones. It's so delicious. You get this little scooper. You just need 1 teaspoon of the coffee concentrate into your drink. And if you want it stronger, you can do 2. I definitely do 2. And each teaspoon is a serving, and each serving has 60 milligrams of caffeine. So you're still getting all the caffeine and all the benefits from the coffee.
Good Lord.
Oh, yeah. And you can make it any way you want. You can do hot. You can do iced. You can do cappuccinos or whatever the fuck you want. You can do
hot bean
anything.
Juice.
Yes.
Hot bean juice.
Or cold bean juice. You
cold
just get your good bean juice.
What are you worried about? It's bean juice.
It's bean juice.
What are you worried about?
Get you some bean juice. It is so freaking good. I'm addicted now. I have not turned on my coffee pot all week because I've literally only been making these and they're so delicious. I add caramel and vanilla into my caramel brulee. It's good. It's a great way to start your morning. So if you guys want to get you some and save 15%, use code LACI, Laci, 33468. Yes, that is your discount code. And I'm very sorry. We are trying to get it changed to Daily Faith. But in the meantime,
Please enjoy.
just roll with us and use code Laci 33468 for 15% off. Links will be in the show notes or description box below. Now back to the episode. Anyways, let's just jump right in.
Talk to me.
Today's trigger warnings, there's not a whole lot of trigger warnings. Murder, of course, but I'm going to give you the caveat that it is very graphic.
Yeah, I was going to say gore. Is gore a trigger warning?
Yes, it's very gory. So like very graphic. And then we're going to mention some affairs, not very much, but just a little bit. So let's jump right in.
Okay.
In the small country town of Wiley, Texas, just north of Dallas, lived Alan and Betty Gore.
Why are we stuck on Texas cases? Why do all of these happen in Texas? I swear, like there's been at least 5.
Which other ones happened in Texas? The Danny Lee Corwin, the Texas serial killer, that one, my sister found out about that one, and that one was local, so I'm from Texas. So that one's because I was from Texas.
Okay.
And which other ones are from Texas? I guess.
I don't know, but I just feel like we talk about Texas a lot because you'll always be like, I'm a Texas girl. Or it was close to where I went to church, or close to, I don't know.
No, that one, oh shoot, now I'm drawing a blank, but the husband that convinced his woman he was having an affair to shoot his wife and kill and murder his wife, they met at St. Angela University, which was State University, which was the college I went to. So that was another, well, it happened in Colorado, but
yeah, there's a lot.
Texas is fucking big, okay?
I know, but there's a lot of Texas serial killers, like the Phantom Killer, Candyman, was Angel of Death, whatever, that dude.
I have never heard of that one.
What?
I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole now.
Angel of Death is Janine Jones. And the Phantom Killer, they never figured out who that, it's an unknown killer, the Phantom Killer. Like to this day, we don't know.
Oh.
Have you heard about that?
Oh my God,
case?
I'm gonna go down
No. Just don't.
Do you want to present
I don't know if it has anything. I don't know if it has anything to do.
Okay.
With anything.
Do a precursor and then you can add to this. But everything's bigger in Texas. So I guess murder and crimes bigger in Texas,
Are the dicks? Why did I ask that anyway?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Gonna take another left turn right back into the case. So
Yep.
in a small country town of Wiley, Texas, just north of Dallas, lived Alan and Betty Gore. On the night of June 13th, 1980, Alan Gore called up his neighbor, Richard Parker, around 9 p.m. Alan was currently in Minnesota on a business trip and hadn't been able to get a hold of his wife, Betty, and it had been hours. She was a homebody for the most part, and he had tried calling the home multiple times with no success. They had 2 small children, a 1-year-old baby girl named Bethany, and then a 7-year-old little girl named Alyssa. He knew that Alyssa had spent the night over at her friend's house the night before, and she was going to be dropped off in the early morning because she had a swim lesson around noon or 2 or something like that. So this meant that the only reason Betty would have to leave the home that day was to take Alyssa to her swim lesson, and then she'd be home. And now it's way late at night. She should have been home for hours. And
So she didn't work or anything, right?
No, she was a stay-at-home mom. Yeah. So he can't get a hold of her. So he knew something was wrong, or he felt like something may be wrong. And he was desperate to see if Richard, his neighbor, would go over and check on his wife. Richard agreed, but he was home alone with the kids. So he just popped over to their house really quick and knocked on the door. But he didn't get an answer. He quickly came back and told Alan that nobody was home. Alan thanked him for checking and hung up. He then decided he would just try Betty again in a little bit. But in the meantime, he decided to call their friend Candy. Candy's daughter was the friend that Alyssa, his daughter, had spent the night with the night before.
Okay.
You tracking?
Yeah.
Okay. So he calls Candy because Candy was
You're
supposed
hitting me with a lot of facts just right off the bat. So I'm trying my best.
I really am. If you get confused, just ask questions.
Okay.
Because there is a lot coming at you.
Okay.
After a little bit, the characters will kind of settle in and you'll be like, oh, okay.
Perfect.
Realize who's who's. But so Candy,
Mm-hmm.
Candy's daughter, is friends with Alyssa,
Yes.
Betty and Alan's daughter, and
Yes.
she was staying the night with them. So Candy was supposed to bring Alyssa back home earlier that day for a swim lesson later on in the day. So he called Candy to be like, hey, when you went there, did you notice anything? Did Betty say she was going to go anywhere? Like what? you're the only one I know that would have been to the house today. So he calls Candy up and he told her that he couldn't get a hold of Betty and asked if anything seemed weird or out of place. Now, Candy said no and asked Alan why and where he was. He told her that he was out of town on business and was currently in Minnesota and explained how he hadn't been able to get a hold of Betty all day long. Candy then told Alan that Alyssa was actually still with them and was staying the night again. They had actually changed their plans and decided to go to the movies and wanted Alyssa to come with them. So while they were at VBS that morning at church, Candy left and went to Alyssa's, Betty and Alan's house to collect Alyssa's swimsuit and said that she would take Alyssa to her swim lesson.
Okay.
And so she was spending the night again and she did the swim lesson and everything for.
So Betty wouldn't have to leave.
So Betty should have been home all day.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So
Betty,
no
where you
reason
at?
for Betty to leave. And Candy said that she went over there. Betty was sewing. Whenever she arrived, they stopped and chatted and sat down for just a little bit. And then she collected the swimsuit and then some peppermints because they use these peppermints to like encourage Alyssa while she's swimming, like when she gets her head fully under the water. So I guess she was scared. And so, every time she would fully dunk her, I know, right? Like every time she'd fully dunk her head, they'd give her a peppermint. So she collected the peppermints and the swimsuit. And then she left. He asked if Betty seemed odd or mentioned anything about going anywhere. And she said, no, everything seemed normal. She didn't mention having to go anywhere, nothing. So by 10 p.m., Alan is now increasingly more worried and is still unable to get a hold of Betty. So he calls Richard back. He asked if he would just pop over there and see if their car was in the garage. Richard could tell that Alan was very worried, so he agreed and went over very quickly. He came back and told Alan that Betty's car was in the garage and the garage was actually open and the lights were on. This sent alarm bells off. Alan's like, something is wrong. This had to have been some kind of emergency for her to leave the house in this kind of state. And why is her car there? So he's thinking like she had to call the ambulance or something like that and got picked up.
Oh, shit.
So he starts calling all the hospitals, all the police stations, everyone. Nobody even knows who Betty Gore is. Alan is now in complete desperation. So he called Richard back for the third time and begged him to go and get into his house by any means necessary. He's like, break a window, break the door down. Like, I don't care what the fuck you have to do. Get into my home.
I feel the same way. I feel the panic. Like,
yeah,
I'm feeling that secondary panic that I feel like he's also, experienced. God.
Richard feels that too. And he agrees. But he's also highly uncomfortable because this is like the neighbor that you just kind of know in passing. They don't know them very well. They're not friends with Betty and Alan. And so he's having to break into a home. He has permission to do this, but he's having to break in.
Oh, but he could get framed. Oh, shit. Now I'm worried.
Yeah. Well, and also he's like breaking into a home where there's small children and a woman only. He knows there's no man inside. So like... Is he going to get shot if she's scared? Like what? Like I'm sure all of that's going on. This is Texas. Like, it's scary. So he agrees. But since he's nervous, he decides to call his wife who was out. I think she was playing bridge or bunco or something like that.
Oh, I love bunco.
So, I love bunco. Bunco is the fucking best if you've never played bunco. I had bunco groups when I lived in Oregon and we would meet once a month. And we also had bunco groups when I lived in Idaho. And it was... so good.
Icon.
Anyways, asked her if she would come home. Like, just come home. I need to go do this. And I don't want to leave the kids alone. And I'm not really sure what I'm about to walk into. Like, she's like, okay. So he's not going right away. He's waiting for his wife to get home. In the meantime, Alan is, he's growing impatient, understandably. So he calls another one of the neighbors. This is neighbor number 2. And he explains what's going on and asks him to go check their home. The neighbor number 2 agrees and he leaves Alan on the phone on hold while he pops over to the Gore home. He checked the back door that went into the utility room, but it was locked and no one was answering the door. He goes back to his home and picks up the phone. So like Alan was still on the phone. They just like set the landline down, right? Because this is back in the day, landlines, you couldn't just like take it with you. No cell phones.
I love a good corded phone.
Very corded. You just set it down. He picks up the phone and tells Alan what he found. And Alan begs him again, go back, get into my home by any means necessary. The neighbor can tell how scared Alan is, so he agrees.
Give him the chair.
Right?
Give him
Seriously.
the chair.
Okay. So the neighbor, agrees, but he also doesn't want to do this by himself. So he calls neighbor number 3 and asks neighbor number 3, please come with me.
So
we
many
can go
neighbors.
check out this home. Yeah. Neighbor number 3 says yes. I think their names were Lester and Jerry, I think, because I have it a little bit later on. But
yeah, that's Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they go over to Betty and Alan's house, but right as they're in the back, alleyway of the house, they run into Richard. And they're like, what are you doing here? And he's like, going to check Betty and Alan's home. They're like, we're going to check Betty and Alan's home. So they all go together. So now there's this caravan of men going to check this home.
Oh, God. This must look so weird from the outside. Just 3 very confused and anxious men. I'm assuming they're white.
Yeah. And not one of these men, I think, are super close with Betty or Alan. They are just the, hey, neighbor, it'd be like one of my 2 side neighbors. I know them. I know their name. I say hi. We have some chit chats, but
how's the weather over there? Yeah.
Yeah, basically. If I had to go breaking into your home, I would be terrified, Yeah. So they all go up and they go to the utility door, but none of the keys that Richard had. Richard was a realtor. So he had a ring of realtor keys.
The janitor keys.
Basically, that's kind of what I'm getting. Okay. I don't think that that's a thing anymore, realtor keys.
No.
Okay. But I think this was a thing back then. So he tries all his realtor keys in the utility door. None of them are working. So they go around to the front of the house. They're trying all the windows. All of them are not only shut, but they're also locked. So they're not getting in that way. And so then they go to the front door. And before Richard's, fumbling, or not before, but while Richard's fumbling with his keys, one of the men just tries the front door and realizes it's unlocked.
Oh,
so they go in.
Shit.
They go in. Mm-hmm. The men enter the home and find it eerily quiet. They all start They all start calling out Betty's name, but get no response. With each step further into the Gore home, the men are growing increasingly more worried. Each room they come to, they step in, turn on the light, and call Betty's name. But each room, they were coming up empty. That is, until they got to baby Bethany's room. When they open the door and turn on the light, baby Bethany immediately starts wailing. I
was going to ask where the baby was.
Mm-hmm. It was instantly noticeable. The moment they took a look at baby Bethany, they knew that something terrible had to have happened, because baby Bethany's face was bright red from hours and hours of crying. Her hair was knotted all over the place, and she was covered in her own feces. Richard quickly goes over and scoops up the baby and takes her back to his house, passes her off to his wife, and says, call the cops and stay inside until I figure out what's happening over at Betty and Alan's home.
Yeah.
He then grabbed his gun and returned to the Gore home to help continue to look for Betty. He gets back. I know. I'm like,
this is a terrible horror film. I don't watch scary movies for this reason.
And this is why I'm doing a 2-parter, because there's so much detail with this case that's if I cut it out, you just really wouldn't understand.
We're only 15 minutes into this, and I am I've got palpitations happening. This is so much. It's good detail. I'm glad, you have all this info.
Yes. Yeah. We're here. Hold on to that, because in episode 2, you're just going to be fucking pissed. I'm just going to tell you that now. Mm-hmm. But just as Richard got back to the house, Jerry and Lester had made it to the utility room. Lester opened the door and within a split second quickly shut it.
What do you mean by utility room?
So this is the room where it's the washer and the dryer, the
laundry
deep
room.
freezer. Mm-hmm. So it's the room that you would go into before going into your garage. Okay. So that's kind of...
Some people call that a mud room.
Mud room. Yeah, we're in Texas, so it's dry as fuck. So it's just utility room,
In Alabama, I would call that a mud room, but
mud room. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I can't remember the layout of their house. It's been a while since I actually looked at pictures. So I'll look at it before we get into episode 2 or part 2 of this. But from what I'm gathering is it was like a detached garage. And so the door from the utility room led outside, and then you would go into another door to get into the garage. That is what I'm thinking. If I'm wrong, I will correct it in part 2, but I will look that up and clarify.
Okay.
So he opens the door, and within a split second, he quickly shuts it. He stepped back and told the men that he saw a massive amount of dark red and brown blood, and he knew that Betty had to be dead. They're not a person in that room can be alive with that much blood he saw. Lester didn't want to look any closer, so he stepped away from the door, and Jerry moved towards it and peeked inside. Jerry stepped away and said, "Oh my God, she's blown her head off." So,
no.
The utility room was covered in blood, covered. And in many places, the blood was a 1/2 inch to an inch thick. Betty was unrecognizable. So it was understandable that Jerry thought that she had used some kind of high-powered gun to commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
The men quickly step towards the phone to call 911, but as they do, the phone starts to ring. Richard picks it up, and it's Alan. He starts frantically asking Richard what they found, and they had to break the news to him that his wife was dead, and it looked as if she had been shot. They reassured him that Bethany, the baby, was okay, but they told him that they didn't know about Alyssa. They couldn't find her. That's when Alan tells them, "That's okay, Alyssa's with a friend at a sleepover, so I'm glad the kids are okay."
Baby girls
put everybody
are good.
else at ease for the children. Alan, after he quickly reassures them, he just starts being confused. How is she shot? Did she shoot herself? If she shot herself, how did she shoot herself? We don't even own a gun. He's so confused.
Of course.
Now, the men hang up with Alan and call the police to inform them what they found. Wiley, Texas is a small ass motherfucking town.
Great.
Just north of Dallas, right? It's a place where everyone knows everyone and crime is astronomically low. The community is tight-knit and everyone is seen as friendly. It's also pretty small, and so the police force is a grand total of 5 people.
I was about to say, is it 5 people?
The whole town. Yeah, 5 people for the whole town. Thankfully, they knew that this was something that was way out of their wheelhouse, so they called in reinforcements from the Dallas police. This was the first murder in many of the people who lived in Wiley, Texas. This was their first murder in living history. They had not had a murder in Wiley in decades upon decades upon decades. So it was a shocking thing for this area.
Super scary.
So they called the Dallas police. The Dallas officer that was called out arrived on scene and quickly noticed that the crime scene had already been highly contaminated.
Of course.
In ways that were irreparable. So in the living room of the Gore home was the entire police department, so all 5 people, along with I think it was around 10 of the neighbors were just standing in Betty and Alan's living room.
Guys!
She's
Get out!
brutally killed in the other room. And they're all just "Oh my God, we're going to stand here." What? This is in the 80s. So we know how to preserve a crime scene. So what?
I was about to say, we're well past the 40s and 50s where maybe you'd be a little what's going on?
I'm okay, I understand that your police force was only 5 people. You haven't dealt with murders, but preserving a crime scene, even when it's not a murder, is in my opinion, I'm not an officer, but I'm thinking 101 on how to police shit. I don't know. It's just me though. What do I know? I don't know anything. So as the officer was examining the crime scene, he noticed trails of blood that weren't going to be able to be thoroughly investigated. So many people had gone in and out of the room where Betty had been murdered and even in and out of the house, which trailed blood literally everywhere outside the front of the house. This meant that no matter...
So was part of the blood, yes, part of the blood was still wet.
Yes, there was so much of it that it like
okay,
was,
yeah, because they said they saw dark red and bright red blood.
Yeah.
Huh.
So this meant that all those trails of blood leading out of the house, all those footprints, it didn't matter what it told them. It didn't matter what they figured out from it because any prosecutor would easily get that evidence thrown out of court because it had been contaminated. So he's like, well, that's pointless, basically pointless. It could kind of lead them in the right direction, but not something they could use to convict somebody at all whatsoever because it would not hold up in court. But thankfully, he did notice trails of blood leading to the bathroom and signs that somebody had tried to clean themselves up. There was blood on the bath mat, on the soap dish, and in the shower. They also found large clumps of hair in the shower and were able to lift fingerprints from the bathroom. In the utility room, they found a clean red thumbprint on the freezer door. Now, due to it being a fingerprint that was made in blood, they photographed it first because these kinds of fingerprints, when they get lifted, it's really hard to actually lift them and have a viable fingerprint. So they photographed it first just in case. Thank the heavens.
Top-notch police work for only 5 people that are like not... They don't deal with this type of shit?
No, this is the Dallas investigator.
Oh, never mind.
The other guys just stood there not fucking knowing what to do until the Dallas guy. And we come back to these investigators besides the Dallas one. The Dallas one knew what the fuck he was doing.
Oh, good. Okay.
So he tried to lift the fingerprint after he photographed it. It did not work. It failed. And so he was kind of expecting that. So thankfully they do have this photograph of it. Now, they also found bloody footprints made by what looked like flip-flops. And due to the size, it pointed to the killer actually being either a woman or a child because they were so small.
Candy. No, sorry.
So who knows? Now, while this investigator is doing his job, another officer approaches him with what looks like a partial fingernail that he found. Just
gross.
Picked it up. But also just like picked it up and took it over and they're like, look what I found. Excuse me, what? And so the office, I don't know what the police investigator...
Texans are wild.
I don't know what the police investigator told him to do with it. But that officer, this is one of the wily officers, just went and laid it beside the microwave. And it got left there. So when the Dallas officer finished with his thing and left, he left it there. It was found by Betty's family a couple days later, and they all touched it before it made its way to the crime lab. And when it was at the crime lab, they realized it's not Betty Allen's fingernail. It's the killer's fingernail. But now this is another thing they can't use in court, even if it points to a killer, because where the hell did you get this?
Yeah.
It's the chain of custody has been very much broken.
It's been breached.
Motherfucker, way breached. So, anyways, that was the fingernail. Back to the crime scene. After the crime scene investigator finished at the scene, he told the police it was a crime of circumstance and not premeditated. He also said that it, like I said earlier, a woman or a child based off the size of the flip-flops. That was sort of the footprints he was finding. He also informed them that it wasn't a gunshot that killed Betty, but actually an axe. And the weapon was found at the scene of the crime. It had been slid under one of the appliances in the utility room. Mm-hmm. No. So it was like if the murderer got done with the axe and then just tossed it to the side and it slid. And it just kind of slid. It wasn't fully under the appliance. It was
Why are you tossing it? What's happening?
Slightly sticking out. Mm-hmm. So she had been axed to death. Now, trigger warning, we're getting pretty gory for a minute. So hold on to your butts.
I don't have a butt to hold on to. You took away my butt with the first 20 minutes of the story. God damn.
I'm so sorry.
Just proceed to the root.
Mm-hmm.
Seatbelt on.
When he did a preliminary examination of Betty at the scene, he counted more than 40 blows from the axe. 40. I don't know if you've ever swung an axe. Those motherfuckers are heavy. So you're 40?
We're not talking about a hatchet. We're talking about an axe.
We're talking about an axe. And I want you to understand how fucking bloody this scene was. There's blood everywhere. They said that most of the wounds that he found, like from the axe, you could tell that the heart was still pumping blood at the time of those whacks. So like blood is going everywhere. So also, have you ever tried to hold on to something after it's slippery?
Oh, stop talking.
So just imagine this scene. And the reason you'll understand in part 2 why I am getting so detailed with this crime, and I need it to be detailed for you.
This is so gross.
Because it comes into play. I'm so sorry, but it comes into play. Okay, it does.
Okay, no, it's good. We've got to talk about it. We've got to. I mean, for Betty's sake, we got to talk about it. So
Betty deserves so much. Okay, now
Betty, what happened, girl? So sorry.
Now it doesn't get better. So 40 blows from the axe, and they could tell the heart was still beating, through a lot of them. He even found wounds so deep that they showed signs that the axe, guys, this axe had gotten stuck in the body, and it had to be fucking wiggled in order to release the axe.
Don't wiggle
from
it.
the body.
We don't have to wiggle.
They continued to axe.
This was like hatred. Someone was livid. Someone was anger.
Thank you.
What?
I need you to fucking remember that, okay? I need you to remember that.
What did Betty ever do to you? Stay at home mom. Just
right? Now, one of Betty's arms had such a deep laceration that at first they thought it had been completely severed. It wasn't, but it was basically there. The arm was also in such a large pool of blood that they said it looked as if her arm was floating on top of it. I know. I wish you guys could see Lola's face.
I don't like this game. You'll see it in the fucking Opus clips. I swear to God.
Yeah.
I gotta hug myself.
Her left eye was wide open, looking down at her wounds, while her right eye was completely gone. Actually, the right side of her face was completely gone. It was completely mutilated and not there.
So they're a lefty.
There's a right, left. Is it? I don't know. I don't know what that tells you.
If you're a lefty, normally
that makes
I'm a
my
lefty.
brain hurt.
I'm a lefty, so if I'm going to swing, I'm going to swing to the right.
But also with an axe, you're using both hands, and you're usually coming down.
Yeah, but you haven't seen me use an axe, lady. Let me tell you, I go.
If you're swinging an axe like a bat, I do not want to go axe throwing with you.
No, like to chop wood. I've never gone axe throwing. I've just used an axe to chop wood or like do outside work.
But you wouldn't do that with just one hand. You do it with both.
No, you do it with both hands. That's correct. But like you have a dominant hand that is pressing a specific way.
Okay.
Your adductors are used to going a certain way because it's your dominant arm. So sometimes it's going to have you leaning a certain way. I mean, I don't know.
Leaning. Okay, I can see the leaning.
I don't know how this person is specifically, if they're going like from top, like both arms over the head down, or if they're like to the side. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see. Okay, yeah. I can see that.
And based on how many times they did this, I cannot imagine it was just over, down. It could have been hacking to the from the left. So
yeah. And a lot of these wounds on Betty's arms were like self-defense wounds. Like she was trying to.
Of course, she's got babies that need her. She's got a husband that needs her.
She has a 1-year-old upstairs in her crib right now.
I can't imagine. I think that was the only thought in her mind was, don't hurt my baby.
Yeah. So to say that this was a brutal crime is, like I said, the minimum understatement.
The minimum understatement. Also, it doesn't matter if they're left-handed. That was just like an offhand comment. It doesn't matter. In the 80s, they thought left-handed people were crazy. So like that would have added to the narrative. But like,
oh yeah, it would have. Now, the fact that a murder in general has happened in this small town was shocking enough for the police, but a brutal axe murder was just incomprehensible. I don't know where else to say this, so I'm just going to kind of throw this in right here. But while the officers, it's just fucking crazy. It just shows you like small town shit. While the officers are currently investigating this crime, like Betty's body is still in the house. It's still a crime scene. One of the neighbors was driving up and down the streets, informing all the neighbors that Betty had been murdered. Just going house to house.
Now's not the time. Later.
Right?
Later. You know how Jesus said there's a time for everything?
Yeah, this was not it. Not it. Sorry, Charlie. Now, the weekend after the murder, many people ordered new locks, and the locksmiths were working overtime to install the large loads of new orders they got, not only from Wiley, but also the surrounding areas. Many believe the killer was a drifter or someone who was psychotic, quote, like they said that. Also, everyone in town thought that it had to be a big man to be able to like axe a woman to death, because also a lot of the information that we know right now, the public did not know. They just knew Betty was axed to death. That was pretty much it. Like, that's what the town knew. So they're like, oh, it had to be a big man, which like I understand where they would go.
Hey, men are the worst. You know? I get it. Like,
right. But also like the strength, especially 40 times. I get that. It's exhausting. But they don't know that about the flip-flops. It's like, you still could be a man. Just a very, very tiny man with tiny feet. Nothing wrong with tiny feet.
Tiny, fashionable man.
Just statistically, it's more likely to be a woman with that size feet.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about Betty and Alan and who they were. Now, growing up, Betty was considered to be one of the popular kids. She had fully developed, if you know what I mean, by the time she was in the 8th grade. This was well above any of her friends. She was considered to be gorgeous, loving, caring, kind, sweet, just a very typical, like, down-to-earth person, loved by everybody.
Girl.
There you go. That's a great way to describe her. She was the type of person that embraced her femininity. That's like the anonymity, like Nemo trying to
Don't
say,
even try
I
to
live
say
in an anonymity. I can't say it.
Anonymity?
And that thing. That's me trying to say femininity. That.
Fine.
She embraced that while also going out and driving tractors. Her dad was a farmer, so she'd go out and like drive tractors, and she very much embraced like masculine type activities and things. So she was just all around amazing. Her family was part of the Methodist Church, and she spent most of her time as a teen going to and socializing with the Methodist Youth Fellowship Group. It was said that this was where she felt most at home and wanted to spend most of her time. Betty was categorized as someone any mother would dream for their son to bring home, and it was said that she could have had the pick of the lot. She was the whole package, beautiful, with a wonderful, loving personality and more. So like, this girl had it going on. And she had a great family, like a great family. I'm going to get into a quote in part 2 of what her dad says, and it brought me, something that like her dad experienced during all of it, and it brought me to fucking tears, guys. Just goddamn tears.
Stop.
Like, I can't.
You know, I get emotional. I'm going to have to flip my bangs inward so I don't get emotional right now. Okay.
When Betty went to college, she had a teacher's assistant in her math statistics class.
Wow.
I can't. All these T words, femininity, I can't do them, guys, okay? Can't do it. His name was Alan. She was struggling in the class, and so she asked Alan for private tutoring lessons, and he said yes. Now, he thought that it would be very inappropriate for him to date a student, and so he gave her these private tutoring lessons in the library of the school. So it was very public, and they could be seen by everybody. And after she finished the class, she continued to have tutoring lessons by him. But since she was no longer a student, their friendship quickly turned into a romantic one. Now,
I love.
So cute. Alan was a hard worker and a great guy, but his family and friends were kind of shocked when, Betty's family and friends were shocked when she brought Alan home. They said that since Alan was shy, he could kind of come off as snobby sometimes. And I think they all kind of thought that Betty was just settling. But in reality, Betty really loved Alan. Like, she truly loved him. And when her family figured that out, they were like, okay. And they supported her choice. And they just let Alan, like, brought him into the family as if he was just always a part of it. They made him feel loved. The two ended up...
Cue the song, She's in Love with the Boy.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now, the two got married in 1970, and quickly after their marriage, Betty's what I would consider separation anxiety started to form. Alan had gotten a job offer for some kind of like technology degree within the military. They told him the job was his, but they had to do certain checks and balances and things like that before the final offer could be made to him. As time went on and he still hadn't gotten the official job offer, Betty started to become more and more anxious. She even started to believe that Alan didn't actually have a job offer. As her anxiety increased, she ended up developing a condition called spastic intestines, where she would have random stomach pains. One doctor thought that it was the beginning of appendicitis, while her family doctor thought it was the beginnings of a stomach ulcer. After Alan finished his degree, he got the official job offer and they moved to I think it was like, no, maybe it wasn't Colorado. I said Colorado, but that actually has to do with candy. Somebody else. I can't remember. So they moved somewhere else with the military and had this job. Shortly after that, her condition cleared up. So I think it's safe to assume that a lot of her stomach pains and condition that she was dealing with was from the stress,
the anxiety,
and the anxiety that she was dealing with. Mm-hmm. Now, shortly, after all this starts to clear up, anytime Alan had to go somewhere for work or be away from Betty for any length of time, she would increasingly become extremely worried. She did not want to be left alone. So she had like grown up with her parents. They were always there. And so she always had this security. And so I think that maybe, like, this is my opinion, but I think when she like came out of that and got married, she was having to shift that security to somebody else. And it's very different. Like, you're still learning that person.
No, I think that's really common too. When you first, like, if you haven't lived on your own before, you lived with your parents and then you immediately get married and move out and you're just with them and nobody else. Like,
yeah,
that's a lot because you've had the safety before, the safety and security. And now it's kind of like,
Mm-hmm. And you have more responsibility. So the carefree stuff is kind of going out the window more and you're like having the reality of life. And so like all of this is really hitting her at this time. And she's really struggling. Poor thing. She's really, really struggling. Now, one time when Alan was away on business for a few days, she actually stepped out on the marriage with a younger college classmate of hers. When Alan got back home, though, she confessed about it and told him that she was like lonely and confused, and she apologized and she felt absolutely awful about it. And Alan actually forgave her and they worked through it. And that was very, very early on.
Okay.
After a few years, Alan ended up getting a job in Texas. So after Betty finished her teaching degree, they moved out to the Lone Star State. It was hard for Betty to find a job, though, as a teacher within just a few months of the school year starting, because like they moved after the school year had started. So She substituted and sold Avon from door to door. She was not happy about doing this. This was not what she wanted.
Yeah.
Now, during this time, she also found out that she was pregnant. This pregnancy was very hard on Betty. And shortly after moving to Texas, she started seeing a doctor for an array of ailments: allergies, congestion, depression, upset stomachs, and just more. Like the poor thing's her anxiety is just ravaging her body. Now, Betty and Alan were involved in their local Methodist church, but home life was a lot for Alan. It was hard for him to know how to support Betty and all she was going through. So over time, he became more and more involved in the church. He joined groups and signed up for committees until eventually he was assigned to be the chairman of the Council of Ministries.
Wow.
The more Alan seemed to get involved in the church, though, the more Betty seemed to become distressed. She was at home struggling with her mental health and trying to care for Alyssa, and Alan was out living life with no care. I think Betty was probably a little jealous of like how Alan was able to just live without the stress and anxiety that she dealt with every single day. On top of that, Betty had eventually obtained a teaching position at one of the local schools, but she was struggling because they had an open classroom type learning environment, which was highly different than what she was used to. And she did not like it. Like it was just, Betty's a very much like follow the rules. she's very rigid in like what she does.
She's got structure that works for her.
She's very structured.
Helps her thrive within that. That makes sense. I understand that. Betty, I get you.
Yes. And so this was very, very hard on her. So in the fall of 1974, Betty fell into her deepest depression. But around this time, Alan was assigned to a job in Switzerland. And he was supposed to be away, I think, he was supposed to be away, I think, for like a month or two, or maybe 3 months. Again, it was a long time. And Betty's anxiety and depression got so bad that she actually called his boss and begged him to let Alan come home. I mean,
Betty.
I understand her having this, but like I can also understand Alan being highly embarrassed. Like, you're calling my boss and I'm the one that's making us money. Like, but also this is the 80s, so we don't really understand mental health. So there's not the resources. So like everyone's just fighting for survival at this point.
To be honest, marriages back in the day, communication was not like, for some people, they communicated well in a healthy way, but like, sounds like they may not have.
No. And Alan knew that something was wrong. Like, he's embarrassed, but he knows something's wrong. So he actually did cut his trip short, and he came home after, I think it was just like 3 weeks. And he asked his boss when he got home, can you just transfer me to a new position to where I'm only working in the Dallas area? And his boss agreed. So now he's only working at home. That's going to kind of put Betty at ease a little bit more. Betty's teaching job that she had just gotten was in Wiley. So she was having to commute because they were living just outside Wiley. I think it was like a good 50-minute drive. And so they decided to make things easier on her. They sold their house and they ended up buying the house on Dogwood Street where she was murdered in Wiley.
Okay.
Alan said that after these changes, Betty seemed to be getting a lot better.
Oh,
what
good.
seemed like out of nowhere, though, Betty decided to start fostering children. Okay. This was like super random. And it shocked everybody because, like I said earlier, Betty's very structured and like she has her ducks in a row. She has her things. But she's also a very strict disciplinarian at home and at her teaching job. And it just really gave many people the impression that Betty just didn't really get along with kids all that well. And so, especially to be bringing in like foster kids, it just really like shocked a lot of people. One of their first pastor was a woman named Jackie at this Methodist church. And she said that Betty treated her kids like small adults rather than children. And
that's weird.
Not good. But also you have to think this is in the 80s. And so like,
that is true.
Children are seen, not heard. And that's how she was raised.
Yeah.
And that's how she's probably raising her kids. And so it's, it's also the religious aspect because she grew up religious.
We're not saying it's right, but we understand.
I can understand how we got from A to B,
Yeah.
Now, this is really sad.
Okay.
And none of this.
I'm sorry, was she fostering before she had Bethany?
Yes, this is before Bethany was born.
Because Bethany was only like a year when...
One.
Okay.
Yeah, she didn't foster for very long. And you might be asking, why the fuck are we even bringing up this foster shit? Because does it really have anything to do with the murder? No, it doesn't. But...
I like a side story.
There are certain things that get brought up. There's certain things that get brought up when we get into part 2. So we will touch base on it then, but we have to kind of talk about it now.
That is the most Southern thing that you say.
What?
Brought up.
Is that not?
She said,
do you not say that? I'm like, do you not say that?
No.
You're Alabama too.
Wait. Say a phrase again where you say brought up. Hold on.
This will be brought up in part 2.
Okay.
So that's why we have to touch on it now.
Where I believe that this will be brought up. Or we'll touch on this because it may be brought up. So, but you say brought up, and that's...
Is brought not a word? It's legit. No, it's brought not a word?
It's not a word. It's like... It's a Southern slang thing, though.
It's not slang. It's in my Texas dictionary, so like... Suck on that.
I will. Bring it here. I will. Okay. We've got to get back on track now.
We do. Anyways, another right turn.
Betty.
Here we go.
Okay.
Betty. Now, okay, this is going to be really sad. Okay, I'm so sorry. But one of the foster kids she kept was an 8-year-old boy that Betty was extremely hard on. And even Alan had to sit Betty down and tell her to stop nagging the boy. And he said, he's more or less a good kid. Just like stop nagging him.
Okay.
Now, when the boy asked for a birthday party, Betty made invitations and made him pass them out at school. On the day of the birthday, only one kid showed up.
Oh.
That's so sad. One kid.
No.
Alan was frustrated with Betty, and he told her like, you should have checked in with all the children's parents. Like he felt so bad for the boy. Like he's also blaming Betty. Like both of you could have done it. Like you're both his foster parent. So like, but Betty got mad and she got very defensive and said that it was the boy's lack of popularity at school. And that's why he didn't have anybody come to his party.
Betty, girl, don't say that.
Yeah. Eventually, she asked the state to take the boy back. And I think she was like, I can't foster. And we're like, great. I'm glad you came to that conclusion.
Good thing she learned early on she wasn't cut out for that.
You weren't cut out for that. Now, okay. I'm trying to, how do I say this without being like an armchair diagnosis type person? But okay, Betty's very rigid. And when things are not like, she has her comfortability zone. And when things are not in that comfortable zone, she literally falls apart, is what I'm picking up when I've researched this story. Now it's the 80s, so there's not a whole lot of diagnoses going on. There's not a whole lot of help when it comes to mental health things. And so we know that she's having some kind of separation anxiety because it's very evident. But I'd put money on there being some kind of other diagnosis that could happen if she was getting proper mental health. Maybe it's somewhere on the neurodivergency scale, or maybe bipolar. I don't know. I'm just throwing shit out there. But like,
actually, it sounds a little bit like OCD.
OCD. Okay, I can see that
like
too.
OCD, and there's so many misconceptions with it.
Yes.
We can't go into it, but like,
and there's different types.
Yeah, there's so many different types. Just know it's not always the whole like, I have to touch something so many times, or I have to, and it's gotta be clean or organized.
Yes.
It's not like that at all. Like sometimes it is, but whatever.
Yeah, it's not always.
It sounds
like,
a little bit as if it could be some type of OCD.
Yes. There's so many things that like I've noticed when writing this script. It's like, there is more here.
For sure.
And they're picking apart and being like, she didn't really like kids. It's like, let's dig a little deeper. Like she was probably raised this way. And also if she's OCD or neurodivergent or whatever it may be, and that's also playing on top of anxiety. Oh my God, children know how to press your own motherfucking buttons. Like they find it and they're like.
Not everything is so one-dimensional, but in the 80s, it very much was.
It's not. Yes. They saw it as very one-dimensional. But all right, moving on. In 1978, Betty decided that it was time to have another kid, but she planned it. She planned it down to a T. She's, like I said, Betty is very meticulous.
Nice.
She wanted the baby to be born in the summer so that it wouldn't impact her school year as a teacher. Now, this meant that Alan and her scheduled sex every night that she was at her peak ovulation.
Yeah.
Alan hated the rigidity. We got another one of those damn words. There's too many of those damn words in this script. Rigidity, femininity.
We gotta get you a thesaurus of the synonyms for.
It's not. I know the word and I can say it in my head, but when it goes out of my tongue's like brrr, and like doesn't know how to talk.
Do that again. Your mouth just turned into a motor. That was good.
It literally, I can really like roll those R's.
But, he hated the rigidity of the sex schedule.
Yes. And he started to kind of like grow resentful of Betty. And he had already been kind of resentful because he really liked traveling for his work and he gave that up for Betty's comfort. Yeah. And so he's not happy.
Hey, hate sex can be healing, man, I tell you.
Depends
Moving
on
on.
what it is. Okay, my mind's going somewhere. Anyways, Alan said he knew their marriage needed help, but when he brought it up, he brought up going to what's called the Marriage Encounter Conference. This was a conference that many at their church recommended. It wasn't put on by their church, but many of the church members had went and loved it and was recommending it to all of their members. And we'll talk about it a little bit in part 2, but like it seems really good. Like from it was not very religious. It was very much like relationship, communication. Like I was like,
nice.
Damn, I kind of want to go to that. Yeah,
Nice.
it was really good. Now he wanted to go to that, but when he brought it up, she was like, I have too much on my plate and I don't want to. And she got kind of defensive. And so he didn't want to, push it. And so he dropped it for the time being. Now, eventually they did end up going to the marriage encounter and it completely turned their marriage around. They seemed like two little teenagers falling in love again. And they had even planned, they planned a trip to Europe when it was just going to be them two. It was going to be her first time away from the baby. Wow. She was going to get to have just like free time. And this trip was planned just 1 week. Their departure day was 1 week away when she was murdered.
Oh my God. No, what the fuck?
Yeah, she was killed and like 1 week later, she was supposed to leave. I know. Now, let's talk about Alan and his interview. We're going to jump back to Betty's murder. So Alan called Betty's family to tell them what happened and her parents fell to pieces. They couldn't understand how or why this happened. They quickly packed and made their way to Texas. While they were there in the Gore home, the phone rang and one of her brothers picked it up. After saying hello, the caller quickly said, I killed her, before hanging up. The phone rang again. And no, it's even worse. The phone rang again. And so the brother picks it up. And one more time, the person said, I killed her and I'll rape and kill the daughter too if you don't keep her inside. And then they hang up. Yeah. The man called 2 more times before it was traced to a man recently released from a mental health hospital. He was interviewed, but nothing connected him to the crime. And the police said they didn't suspect him. So it was just one of those things that I still don't fucking understand. I don't get it. Now, a few days later, a drifter was also arrested at a bar in Dallas. He'd gotten very drunk and started saying he had to get out of town because they found that woman. The bartender was scared, and so she called the cops, and he was quickly arrested on public intoxication. When they took him in, they didn't find anything to link him to the murder. The only thing that came close was a pack of rubber flip-flops, like the ones that they believed had made the footprints at the scene of the crime. But his were much too big to be the footprints, the flip-flops that made the footprints. They were a completely different size. So they let him go. Now he tells the officers that Betty was a very anxious person, and she had kind of like a little breakdown the day that that morning that Alan left to go to the airport because her period was 2 weeks late. And she was really scared that she was pregnant again.
Oh, wow.
And she was afraid that the pregnancy was going to completely ruin their trip to Europe. And so that's what they were talking about prior to leaving. And he was trying to comfort her. And they had this system when he would leave, he would get to the airport, he'd call her. When he'd get to where he's at, like the state or wherever he was doing a thing, he'd
just
call
frequent
her.
Updates to keep her like...
Anxiety.
And he
hadn't been away on business trips like this in a really long time. This was just like a fluke thing. They needed his help and he's like, okay, I can do it. Things had been really good at home. And so he thought that it was a good thing for him to go. So he went. Now, since Alan was out of town, it didn't take them long to clear him, but they still weren't quite sure if he was involved in another way. So they decided to have him come in for a formal interview. The police thought the attack could have been like sexually motivated in some way. So they asked if Betty had ever had an affair. Alan told them about the one night stand she had years ago, but said that he never, ever suspected her of cheating after that. Then they asked Alan if he ever stepped out on the marriage, and he said no. They asked him some more follow-up questions, and he answered before they let him go. But when Alan got home, there was one question they asked him that he couldn't shake. They asked, quote, how did Candy act when she found out about Betty's murder? He thought it was weird.
I don't like this. I don't like this game.
He thought it was weird that they were asking about Candy specifically. Many people had found out about Betty's murder. And so why was she the one being singled out? Why were they only asking how she reacted? Why aren't they asking about the pastor? Why aren't they asking about the other neighbors? Why? What? Why are you asking about Candy? So that kind of was nagging him. So also, he had told the cops that she was shocked and devastated, but for some reason, all of this was just really nagging at Alan. So he decided to go to Alyssa, his daughter, and he wanted to ask her a few questions. He asked her what she remembered from VBS that day, and she said that Candy dropped them off and then she left to go get her swimsuit from their house. He asked her when she got back, and Alyssa said that around lunchtime. Alan knew pretty quickly that was a large amount of time to be away from the VBS. So he asked Alyssa if she knew why it took so long for Candy to get back to the church. And Alyssa said she didn't know. He asked if there were any bags from the stores, if she had gone shopping and if she had gone shopping and the bags were in the car. And she said, no, there was nothing. So he's like, okay, this is all weird. And I don't like this. Now, Alan didn't think that Candy could have committed the murder. He's like, there's no way. But he also knew that none of this is looking good. So Candy's also supposed to be the last person to have seen Betty alive. So he's like, okay. So the next day he called the police and told them that he had actually lied during his interview. He had stepped out of the marriage with none other than Candy Montgomery.
God fucking do it. Are you kidding me?
The last woman to see Betty Gore alive. And I have in my note.
I knew it.
I
just want it on the record. I knew it.
It's the 80s, And I have in my notes, kung kung, Law and Order.
Dun dun.
Dun dun.
Yeah.
Do you also watch Resident Alien on Netflix? There's 2 seasons.
No.
Oh my God. If you have not watched it, you should. It's quite hilarious. And it's this guy, it's alien. And he's literally having to pretend to be a human. And he watches Law and Order over and over and over and over again to learn how to speak English. And, and he loves Law and Order. And so then it goes into them trying to figure out all this stuff. And a couple of people find out he's an alien or whatever. And so something happens and he's like, kung kung.
That's good.
It's hilarious. You gotta watch it. Just gonna plug that.
I gotta watch it for sure.
You do. Okay, that was our light moment. Now we're gonna get back in. So he's told the officers. He's like, I lied. I had an affair with Candy. They're like, okay. So they said, they told Alan that they actually knew about the affair, but in reality they didn't. But they wanted Alan to think that they did know, so that he wouldn't go and tell Candy that he alerted the police. So they were trying to play it cool, basically. But they said that Alan would need to come down and clear up some stuff since he lied during the first interview. So he came back again. He goes to the police station, and during this interview, he explained about the whole affair. He told them he saw it as just having fun, but when they broke off the affair, it was really hard on Candy. They had agreed when they started the affair that they weren't going to fall in love with one another, but Candy had actually fallen in love with Alan. He told the officers that the reason he was being honest now was because he felt that Candy was lying. He knew that she was away from the church for much longer than she needed to be on the day of the murder, but he also said that he didn't think that Candy was actually the murderer. He's like, I can't put the 2 and 2 together. This doesn't make sense, but also there's no way she could have murdered my wife. There's no way.
He's kind of dumb. Anyway.
When I tell you this man.
You underestimate a woman's broken heart.
Alan Gore is a dumpster trash shit pile. And you won't understand why until we get to part 2. But I don't like this man.
Great.
No.
I don't like this game.
I don't like this game. I want off this ride. Okay. So
I don't want to play anymore.
we are ending part 1, just giving an introduction to who Candy is. And then next week, we're going to get into the affair and then
oh God,
the rest of the case and the trial and all that. So Candy grew up as an army brat, and every couple of years, her family moved to a new state. It was said that she was very flirtatious from a very young age, even as early as kindergarten. In her teen years, Candy was pretty typical rebellious child, in my opinion. She grew up in a home where there was minimal sex education. Welcome to the 80s and 90s and fuck even now. And she wasn't a fan of school because she said it was boring. She's like, oh my God, this is boring. She constantly fought with her mom because anything Candy said she wanted, she said her mom would always say no. Now, Candy wasn't allowed to wear makeup to school, but she got very into boys pretty quickly. She was like, ooh, I like the boys.
Candy's into boys.
Mm-hmm. Very much into boys. She likes the boys.
Who isn't?
Never mind. On the weekends, it was said that she would I can't speak.
What?
Loiter. Okay.
Loiter.
I spoke text it and it took it as border. And so I was like, that's not right. Loiter. She would loiter around local fast food restaurants and shopping areas and stuff. She just wanted to be anywhere but home. She just meander.
Oh, okay.
She'd meander in. At night, she would sneak out of her house and go skinny dipping with her friends. Now, like I said earlier, in my opinion, this is nothing out of the ordinary. This is very typical rebellious teenager.
Smoking in the bathroom.
Yeah. None of this is pointing to
teenage girl.
I'm going to become a serial killer or a murderer or I'm going to grow up to commit heinous crimes. That's not pointing to this at all, in my opinion. It's just who she was.
Big agree.
After high school, though, Candy didn't really have any ambitions or goals in life. She had dreamed of living on a farm with a lot of animals and children later in life, but that was pretty much it. That's her goal. Live on a farm, have some animals, have some kids. Bing, bang, boom.
Same.
Hey, cool. Love it. As I speak with 30 animals, I get it.
Uh-huh.
Now, she ended up getting a job as a secretary with the NSA and said that it was even more boring than high school. After this job, she realized that what she really needed was a husband. She wanted somebody who could work and bring home the money so she could be a stay-at-home mom, raise kids, and hopefully, just have some kind of farm someday. So she decided, I'm going to set out my goals and try to achieve that. So she starts dating, not for love, but for financial security.
Oh, gosh.
She dated a few men, but ruled them out pretty quickly due to the lack of education or finances. She was set up on a blind date with a man named Pat. And at this date, she said it was painfully boring. She thinks everything's boring. Now, she mainly just listened to him talk about his childhood and his career working in technologies. It may have been a painfully boring date, but she knew that Pat had ambitions to get his PhD in electroengineering. So what is she seeing? She's seeing
money.
Some dollar signs.
Dollar.
Now, for Pat on this date, he had kind of given up on dating altogether. He was kind of socially awkward and he got very nervous around girls. He had dated a few times when with girls that his mom had set him up with, and it usually ended in him leaving the girl standing at the door at the end of the night because he would get so nervous he'd just literally walk away.
This is Andrew coded.
Poor guy.
This is Andrew coded from high school. Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh. Now, he would just walk away. Pat's mom met Candy at work, and that's how he got set up on this blind date with Candy. Now, Pat said that the first thing he thought when he met Candy was, quote, overweight and a double chin, end quote.
Oh my God.
I'm like, you don't have the courage to just have a kiss with a girl at the end of a night, and you're going to have the audacity to
judge their appearance?
To judge. And okay, those are inside thoughts. If you think that, don't say it out loud. This was he gave this quote to a book. Guys, I read the book.
Oh, God.
Jesus Christ, Pat. Come on. So he's like, all right, cool, whatever. Like, you're a little overweight and have a double chin. Wow. Now, he went on to say that Candy was not his type, but definitely somebody that his mom would set him up with. I don't know about you, but like, to me, this screams solid foundation for a relationship. Just nothing better. I can't think of anything better. This is great.
It sounds like a mama's boy. Mommy issues.
Now, even though this first date was awful for both him and Candy, Pat ended up asking Candy out on a second date the very next night, and Candy agreed. So the very next night, they did some couples activities and ended up ending the night at a drive-in movie theater. While they were watching the movie, Pat tried to cop a feel, and Candy was not too thrilled about that. She turned him down, and then she was just pissed that he tried to cop a feel. So he asked at the end of that night for a third date the very next night. Like, you want to go out again tomorrow night? And she said, call me tomorrow. So the next day came and Pat called Candy, but she decided to blow him off. The following day after that, Pat called Candy over and over and over and over again, but she didn't answer. This is kind of when you can see Pat's socially like awkwardness, especially when it comes to dating, coming out, because he was not getting the hint that Candy was blowing him off. And instead, when he needed to leave town to go back to work, he sent her a dozen roses with a letter. And Candy went, "Oh, that's cute." They started talking after this, long distance, but they start talking. Not too long.
They don't like each other. This is just...
I know. Now, not too long after this one, one of Pat's closest family members ended up dying, so he had to return to El Paso, Texas for the funeral. While he was there, he met up with Candy a couple times, and he found himself opening up to Candy, and she started to fall in love with him. Now, in my opinion, Candy, okay, was this her truly falling in love with Pat, or was she realizing that Pat could be tolerable? Because she said Pat was boring. But if Pat's able to be vulnerable with her, maybe she's realizing that Pat's not as boring as what she thought. So if he's being, going to get his PhD in electroengineering, she can make good money. She can have a comfortable life. So like, I've
she
had
can
worse,
deal with them, for
kind
sure.
of thing. Yeah, that's my opinion. That's not fact, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Now, a few days later, and this just like, I feel like solidifies my theory. Because a few days later, Candy ran into one of her friends and told them that she had met the man that she was going to marry. The friend asked her what the man's name was, and Candy replied with, quote, "I don't know. I think it's maybe Pete."
Shut the fuck up.
It's Pat.
She's been on several dates.
Multiple dates with him.
Candy, are you okay?
She didn't know his name. And she's like, "I'm going to marry him." And I'm like,
He's the love of my life. He's the one. What's your name?
You thought he was boring and he said you were overweight with a double chin. So like, this is not.
The first impressions are
Don't do
really.
this. I mean, whew. So
By all means.
But Candy, she was just not going to let something as insignificant as remembering somebody's name stop her from moving forward in this relationship.
Okay.
And just 2 months after they met, they got engaged, and shortly after that, they were married.
That...
I told you it went fast.
I got whiplash. Woof.
I know.
How you come back
and
from that?
They aren't even, both of them aren't religious, so we can't be like, oh, they just wanted to, no.
They just wanted to do it.
No, they weren't religious. They both considered themselves to be agnostic. So like,
they weren't even attracted to each other, let's be honest.
Yeah. I think Pat was like, I am done with this dating thing. It's awkward. I got to reel this one in. Like, yeah, she's
this is horrible.
overweight
My
and a
mother
double
won't
chin.
stop setting me up.
I know. She's overweight with a double chin. I can handle it. Like, nothing's wrong with being overweight. Nothing's wrong with having a double or a triple chin. But he was not using it as something he was attracted to. So like,
no.
It was a condescending remark. He didn't say it. He just thought it.
He's a meanie weenie.
Mm-hmm.
Meanie weenie.
So now, to nobody's surprise, their marriage struggled for a few years. They had moved to Colorado for Pat's schooling so he could finish his PhD, and finances were tight.
Mm-hmm.
Candy hated living in Colorado, and on top of that, they started having children. After a couple years, they moved back to El Paso, and within another couple years, they had their second child and had bought their first home. After Candy gave birth to their second child, she's happy. They had a boy and a girl. So she's like, I'm complete. So she went and got her tubes tied. Now, Candy and Pat both considered themselves, like I said earlier, to be agnostic. They were not religious, but they started attending churches because they said they needed and wanted to do it for the children. Now, one day they ended up attending a Methodist church with a woman preacher named Jackie, and they quickly became very active members. Candy and Jackie actually ended up bonding and became very good friends. They were the type of friends that were there for each other and opened up about their struggles within their marriages. Now, Jackie's husband wasn't a fan of her pursuing a pastoral career, and after they moved into the old parsonage of the Methodist church, he became fed up with Jackie in her pastoral career and everything. He just didn't want to be living in the parsonage. And so he left her and asked for a divorce because he's a little bitch baby. I don't know who he is, but he's a bitch baby. End of story.
Dear God. Okay.
I don't want, he's literally leaving her because she's a pastor and
no, yeah, that's
trying to do it's just, I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. You knew who you were marrying. So fuck you.
It's what the kids would call super lame.
Mm-hmm. Super lame. Now, so they get a divorce, right? And Candy was there for Jackie. This was a very hard time for Jackie. And after a while, Jackie started dating. And when Jackie started dating, Candy started to get very jealous. She was seeing Jackie getting divorced and getting to live life on her own terms. And this was something she desired. She wanted to go and do what she pleased, but still have her cake and eat it too. She wanted the family, but also she wanted to boink whoever she wanted and not have any repercussions. So she decided that that's what she needed. That is exactly what she needed in her life. And she wanted to just have sex outside of marriage with no strings attached. This was what was going to make her happy. And she even told this to her friend Jackie, the pastor of the church. I plan on having an affair. Straight up told her this. My pastor and another church leader that she told this to, another church lady that she told this to, said that, they don't condone it and that's not okay. You shouldn't do it. But they ultimately knew that Candy's the type of person, she gets her mind set on something. There is no turning back. So they knew that
also,
most likely,
she's an adult.
Yeah.
So
inevitably,
what are they going to do?
She going to cheat on them. So she thinks that this is going to make her happy. So this is her game plan. Okay. Now, later that year, Candy ended up joining the church's volleyball team. And during one game, she bumped into a man named Alan Gore. As they bumped into each other, Candy noticed that Alan smelled sexy.
No. Immediately
she
no.
said that. Oh, he smelled sexy.
Wow, I hate it so much.
And now at that moment, she set her sights on Alan and was ready to step out of her marriage with Alan. Now, mind you, Alan is not showing her any attention. Alan is not flirting with her. Alan just smelt a little musty mixed with a little cologne. And she was like,
did you say musty or musky?
Musty. He's playing volleyball. Wait, that's musky.
Well.
Is that musky or is that musty?
So
I don't know.
I think musky is the natural sweat and natural smell. And musty is you walk into a attic that's not been swept and has mold and moths in it.
Well, he was a little bit of both. I don't like Alan.
Okay.
So we're gonna say
that's fine.
We're gonna say musty.
That's fine.
And just pretend that I knew what I was talking about. So yeah, Alan's not flirting with her. She's just like, all right, I'm gonna have an affair with you.
That one, I shall have his penis.
I shall have his penis. Now, what's crazy though is Candy was kind of seen in the church. They've been going to this church for a while, and she was seen in the church as the pretty one. And all the men were attracted to her. They were like, oh, she had the looks and everything. And so Alan, though, if we're going to rate a guy, below average type of guy. Even his, Betty's family, when they brought him home, were like, really? Out of everybody you could have, not just
I'm looking up his picture.
Not just his looks, but his his personality. He's like kind of socially awkward and this is who you're picking. And so it's very like, that's who you're going for? Okay. And how they get into the affair is a whole nother shebang story. And it's so long. That's why we're going to save that for part 2, because that was enough information for today. You saw his picture. I can see the face.
This man is not attractive.
I'm trying to not say that, but Lola said it.
I'm sorry.
I agree though. I'm sorry. But also I don't like him, and you'll understand why I don't like him in part 2. So
yeah, I don't need to say anything more, but in short, not attractive.
Mm-hmm.
That is all.
Yeah. I can't wait for part 2, because when I tell you this is a roller coaster, it is a fucking roller coaster.
I have to wait a whole other week.
I know.
I have to wait with the rest of you guys.
And I'm hoping, guys, that when it comes my turn again after this 2-parter, that I kind of have like another case for you that I've researched in time, because my next case that I have fully researched right now is another 2-parter. So
you guys are in
I'm
for
so
it.
Sorry.
Hey, we got plenty of content coming at you though. So like
we do. And these cases need to be talked about. And I couldn't not talk about this one because it's just fucking wild. But
you know what? Everybody's got their summer coming up, they got plenty to binge.
Oh my God, I'm so ready. I'm so ready. Anyways, palate cleansers. Lola passed out, and then one of my children sharded themselves.
It's been a day.
It's been a day. So
between the salt and the shit and it's a lot happening.
It's a lot. So when Lola called me earlier to tell me a funny story, and as she's trying to talk to me, I have 3 kids, so it's just fucking chaotic when you try to call me. It's hard. Last time I think we talked on the phone, I kept going to different rooms because I was trying to get away from them, and they just kept following me. And I was
yes, you kept saying, please.
I was like,
please let me talk to Lola for 30 seconds
without
by myself.
One of you in here.
I came in here to get away from you.
My husband finally that time had to get them out of the room and lock the door so they couldn't come in. It was crazy.
Wrangle.
I'm sitting there and Lola's trying to talk to me, and all of a sudden one of my children was like, I pooped my pants. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Because this child had just used the restroom. And went number 2. Just used the restroom. And I was like, what? And I think it was I thought I had to fart, but I didn't. And so then I'm like, okay, go to the bathroom. Your father's in the bathroom. We have a 1-bathroom house. And so I was like, go stand by the door and just wait for your father to get done. And she starts walking the other direction. And I was like, that's not the bathroom. And the whole time Lola's listening to this. And I'm like, that is not.
It was a good time.
That's not the bathroom. Go the other direction. And she goes, I have to tell my friend. There is nobody in the direction she's walking to. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And I was like, what do you mean your friend? And my other daughter goes, her imaginary friend. And she's like, she's real. And I was like, okay, what friend are you telling? And she goes, Callie. And I was like, okay, tell Callie you pooped your pants and you need to go get cleaned up. And she was like, no.
I only heard Laci's part of the conversation. I would hear the little muffled voice, but you said, who do you need to go tell this to? Well, tell Callie that you pooped your pants and you'll be with her soon. Or it was very good.
And the whole time I just have Lola in my ear like, oh my God, I love your life.
I didn't know Callie was imaginary till this very moment.
She's my only child that has imaginary friends. And the first time I found out she had an imaginary friend was quite hilarious. And I'm pretty sure people thought that I was psychotic. Or not psychotic, crazy. I was seeing things. I was hallucinating. Because we were in Lowe's and she was in the buggy with me. And it was one of those ones that had the kids' car in the front where they sit on it and they can steer, right? And there's 2 spots. I tried to put a plant in the seat beside her because it was just me and her. And she was like, stop, Leo's sitting there. I was like, oh. Leo. Yeah. So I don't know where. I still to this day have no idea where she came up with the name Leo.
That's fine.
But she came up with it. Leo hung out for a couple of months. And that day, she made sure after I found out that Leo was sitting there, I had to buckle him in. And then she made me give Leo a kiss. Mind you, we're walking through Lowe's. Everybody is seeing me do this. And then when we got out to the car, she made me get Leo out of the car, out of the seat and put him in the car. So I'm carrying nothing, but it looks like I'm carrying something, but I'm carrying nothing through the parking lot.
I'm imagining, when you say she made me, I'm imagining a tiny tiny child with a knife, like a butter knife, though, not like a sharp knife, a butter knife. Like, you better do it.
I love my kid, but sometimes it feels that way because you're having to pick between the fight, the tantrum, or just picking up the imaginary friend and putting him in the car.
Crazy.
And it's like,
just the crazy.
If I pick the crazy, it's 3 seconds and I'm done. If I pick the fight, we're going on 45 minutes and we're losing brain cells. So,
both of us are crying by the end of it.
Yeah. I picked Leo. I gave Leo a kiss on the head and I buckled him in. I did the whole 9 yards.
I think the moral of the story is we should always pick Leo.
I always pick Leo. But Lola hates Leos.
You know what? Just romantically, okay?
Just romantically. Can't be in a
Because apparently all my best friends are Leos. I've been learning this. All 2 of my best friends are Leos.
That's right. That's okay. That's about how many I have.
The other 2 are Pisces. I don't know what that says about me. I'm stuck between Leo and Pisces.
I don't know enough about astrology to be like, yeah, totally. Ooh, that's bad. Or like, oh, that's good. All I know is that our moons line up perfectly. And I love that.
They do.
I love that. It's so cool.
It was meant to be.
Meant to be. Hearts. Anyways, do you have a palate cleanser or was that our palate cleansers?
My palate cleanser is that just the other day.
It's zoomed out of her mind.
Hold on. In India, just the other day, they're closing the gap between rural and suburban areas. So poverty rate in India drops below 5% for the first time ever because rural and urban divide shrinks.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was as of March 4th, 2024. So
I love that.
A little bit back, but
I love, wait, what date was it?
March 4th.
I thought you said
that it was documented.
I thought you said March 24th and I was like, honey, that is the future.
Honey, you're losing it.
My palate cleanser was about Amelia Earhart before my child crapped her pants, but we can still talk about it. They think they might have found Amelia Earhart's plane in the ocean.
I saw that. I was
like, oh my God.
I'm awaiting the info.
They're like, oh my God, we finally know. And I'm like, we didn't already know that she died in the ocean. Like, I'm like, did we all not just like automatically assume she crashed and died in the ocean? Like, was not everybody thinking that? Did you think that? Did you not think that? I'm just so confused.
I thought she was marooned on an island.
Really? I was for sure she crashed in the ocean and died.
Based on the way that she was going, I thought she was going to run into, I forgot. I did research on this in 5th grade, okay?
Look at you. I did not. So like you probably know more.
I made a cereal box about her.
I made a cereal box.
I did. It had a crossword and everything. I worked very hard on this and I learned a lot about her. Half of that stuff I don't remember, but I do remember I had a theory that I presented my teacher with. And he was like, okay, I didn't ask for a theory. I asked for a cereal box.
You're
I was like,
getting one.
Here's the bonus. Here's the toy in the box.
Yeah.
Sit with that, son.
I have to know. So comment over on our Instagram. Did you think that Amelia Earhart got marooned on an island?
Yeah, tell us.
Died in the ocean or got sucked into an alternate dimension? Like, I don't know. What was your theory? She got taken by aliens.
Or did she simply, like that whole levitating to God thing? Who did that? Who didn't die? Elisha.
Oh, you're talking about in the Bible. I don't know.
Levitated to God.
That's hilarious.
In a cornfield, like, hey, you don't gotta die.
I'm just gonna leave your clothes behind.
Yeet.
Anyways, okay, guys, that is the episode. We will see you guys next week for part 2. Don't go look up the case until then, okay? Because you will you will miss a lot of information. I promise. I know.
Laci's got it locked down.
I read the book and there's step-by-step information.
Yeah,
you're going to want it.
You can't read the book.
You're going to want to come back.
I'm just kidding.
Well, you could, but don't. Just let me tell you the story, okay? Anyways, we'll see you guys next week. Go touch grass and wipe your ass.
Drink some water.
Bye.
Also, heathens, if you're enjoying the show so far, please subscribe. Please review. Please give us a like, a share. Send it to your grandma. Send it to your pastor, your local church. By all means, we love a good share. This Clarkcast podcast is produced by Laci Bean and Lola Robbins, and it's audio engineered by Eric Howell. Thanks for listening.